This is the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Podcast, Episode 30, Your Dollars at Work for You, the Illinois Nutrient Research and Education Council, or NREC. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason. The Executive Director for NREC is Julie Armstrong. We'll talk with her today, along with Research Manager at NREC, Shani Gullivi, and NREC Chairman and Illinois farmer, Jeff Kerwin. Let's start with Julie Armstrong. Thank you for being with us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at NREC?
Absolutely. So I have been in the role of the Executive Director of Illinois NREC since 2015. Since that time, we have hired a research manager, and that's Dr. Shani Gullivi. Shani lives in the Greenville, Illinois area. So between the two of us, we manage the day-to-day operations of the council and provide support to our 13-member board.
Shani Gullivi is with us. I'm wondering, Shani, if you can tell us what managing the day-to-day operations of NREC, or the Nutrient Research Education Council, is like.
I coordinate the research aspect of NREC. Because we're a checkoff, we get the 75 cents for every 1 ton of fertilizer, and that goes into an account that we then use to fund research on water quality and nutrient loss in the state of Illinois. One of my jobs, and I think the most fun part of my job, is I get to go out and talk to farmers and growers and farm managers and people in the ag industry and ask them what kind of research they would like to see done. What kind of research are you interested in terms of nutrient loss? What do you not know? What is the piece that's missing? What research do we need to be doing in Illinois to help you make better decisions? I take that information back to the board. The board is also gathering information. And then from that, we make an RFP, a request for proposals, and we put some priorities in there that ask those specific questions to researchers so that then researchers can apply for proposals based on questions that real Illinois farmers and growers have.
I think it's really important to understand that we are the only state in the United States that has a checkoff, if you will, or a contribution from the checkoff dollar that goes to nutrient education, research, and trying to understand what goes on in the state and what's going on and how to deal with some of the ideas and things to put some research behind it. So I think it's, we are unique in that aspect that we do provide our self-funding some of the maybe answers to a lot of the questions that people have.
That's Jeff Kerwin. He's a farmer from south of the Quad Cities in Illinois and serves as the chairman of NREC, or the Nutrient Research Education Council. Julie Armstrong as the executive director, and I think this is pretty important to you. We've heard the word checkoff twice. This really isn't a checkoff. It's an assessment. Can you tell me about the differences here?
Absolutely. So we are funded by a 75 cent per ton assessment on fertilizer that is sold in the state of Illinois. So that is paid by the farmers. It is collected through the retailers. And so that's an important part of that relationship, engaging all of production agriculture through our whole production chain. And it's fascinating. It works a lot like a checkoff. It's a little bit different in that it's an assessment and we're not managed by some of the checkoff rules. But that funding brings in, on average, somewhere between $3.5 and $4 million annually.
We'll get back to some of that funding in just a moment. Jeff, I would like to ask you how you think your farm has been influenced by NREC and the research that's done by the organization.
Oh, it's been a really good tool for me. We've implemented things like a bioreactor and do cover crops on our farm and learning about them, which anytime you learn, you're always asking questions. And I think what's unique for me in my role is that I hear the questions from the farm community, and then that's questions that we issue every year in an RFP for researchers to look at and answer some of these questions. Because obviously part of the strategy is for us to implement some of these, then the cover crops and things like that we need to do on our farms. And there's a lot of questions about it. And there's a lot of concerns about management through it. And so this is a great way for us to ask the research community to look at these questions and provide us some answers and solutions so that ultimately it can be a success.
I don't know whether you'll have an answer for this question or not, but do you like cover crops or the bioreactor, one or the other, better as an option, or do you think both need to be deployed?
I think that's a good question, because I think ultimately they need to be used together. What we see is that, you can't remove all the nitrate, or you can't remove things in a bioreactor 100%. You need to couple that with a cover crop or some, other management tools as well to, it's kind of a system that if you can provide a lot of different things into that system, the total goal is a much greater reduction in those removals.
So, Julie, Jeff discussed some of the things that are on the farm. I'm wondering how those move through NREC to the farm and what those concepts look like early on, and then what kind of research and then how you deploy them.
One of the biggest priorities for the council, really since the inception back in 2012, was making sure that we were able to stay nimble and also to be responsive to arising needs. So, we do a lot of ongoing research on things like 4R management practices, so right place, right time, right form, right placement. And those have been ongoing for a long time. And then we went into cover crops pretty hot and heavy as those were becoming a good option for managing nutrient loss. But a lot of what happens is on an annual basis, we reach out to farmers, we reach out to our member organization partners, we talk to our friends in the environmental community, and then really talk about what are some emerging needs. So it could be that somebody in Southern Illinois wants to know more or feels like there's a need to know more about what's happening to nitrates in a cover crop system where we have a freeze and thaw. And is it causing issues with opening up channels that we could be losing nutrients through those channels? And it may not be something that we would have ever thought of or that a researcher would have thought of. But then we were able to do some ground truthing and find that there really is a need to understand that. We found some researchers who were interested in that type of work. They put in a proposal, and now we are 2 years into looking at what the impact of that might be. So that really being able to be responsive, listening to what the farm community needs, because ultimately the goal of NREC is to have peer-reviewed science that can help answer the questions about what really are the best management practices for managing nutrient loss in the state. And we really focus on it in three different ways. I mean, obviously, the environmental side of it is important. We want to make sure that we are reducing the nutrient load that is leaving our state. But we also really want to look at it from an agronomic and an economic standpoint. We know that farmers run businesses. Farmers, especially in the current climate, are running on tight margins. So we don't want to put things in place that cut into their profit margin. So we want practices that work from an agronomic, economic, and environmental aspect.
You mentioned that you want peer-reviewed work. What kind of organizations typically apply for the grant money that NREC puts forth?
Primarily, probably 95% of our research is done through universities. We obviously have a great partnership with the University of Illinois, being the land grant and being where a lot of those experts are. We also work with Illinois State University. This year we have a project at Western Illinois, which is the first time we've had a chance to partner with them. We work closely with the folks at SIU in Carbondale, and we actually have a project that's done in McLean County, Illinois, but that is done by Dr. Shalimar Armstrong, who is at Purdue. So we really try to focus, most of our work does go through university researchers.
And finally, how does NREC decide its key areas of investigation?
So each year, we have our council, which is made up of 13 members that are all appointed from different organizations. And then we also have a research committee that consists of the majority of the board plus 5 additional farmers that represent the geographic diversity of the state. And so each year we start by putting together a list of priorities. So we really go through what are the things that we're currently looking at, what are the things that are on the horizon, what are things that have arisen as questions or as things that we need to do more investigation on. We send out a RFP, which is a request for proposal. That goes out, and then we evaluate the proposals that come back and really evaluate based on the merits of the program, but then also, of course, on the funds that are available. So, we bring in about $4 million every year. And since 2013, which was our first year of funding, we have funded over $26 million worth of nutrient research. So we're excited and happy, and we really feel like that money is making an impact, and we really appreciate the commitment from Illinois farmers and also from Illinois retailers on making sure that those funds are available and that we can really help move that needle.
Hey, Shani, I know that there's a report that's released every year. This one, I think, came out in the summer, so it was about research that's already happened, that in 2019, I believe. What's inside that report?
Some of the more interesting or more exciting data that we have from this year is Lowell Gentry's study looking at fall and spring nitrogen rates. We also have two studies, both at the University of Illinois and at ISU and Purdue, looking at cereal rye in front of corn. That, again, was a direct question from growers. What about these cover crops in front of corn? How do I manage it? Am I getting a yield reduction? And so we have some really good 3 and 4 year studies looking at different options for cereal rye in front of corn. And if you want to do it, what ways can you do it? We also have some good, really solid numerical data about the loss of nutrients in tile lines when you have cover crops. So we pretty consistently have a 40% reduction in nitrate loss when you use cover crops. And that is a really good number to know. That's a really great number that we can use in the strategy and use to help encourage people to put out some cover crops.
So is there an ongoing place that producers can find this kind of information? Is it all just in the summary, or do we find it on a website? How do producers get hold of it?
If you go to our NREC website, you can see each month we try to put out a investor insight. So we try and go up. We go to the University of Illinois, we go to ISU, we go to Western, we go to Carbondale, and we find out what the researchers are excited about with their own research. And we either do videos or we do a 1-page summary of, hey, this is what Carbondale found about hairy vetch, or this is what Andrew Margonaut is doing a really interesting study with struvite. Or this is what Shalimar Armstrong found when he radio labeled cover crops. And so we put out these 1-pagers on the NREC website, and we send them out to, if you want to sign up for those, we'll send them to email. And we try not to bother people, so it's once a month, and then we post them on Facebook and Instagram so that people can get information in terms of not overwhelming, but when we get really great insights like that, we try and get them out in a 1-page format that people can understand.
Jeff, I'd like to wrap up with you today. What advice, if any, would you give to farmers that would like to adopt new conservation practices, but just aren't sure how they should get started?
Well, I strongly encourage them to talk to the retailers about it, talk to any, all the research. Illinois NREC has a website with all the research cataloged on it. So if you have specific questions about certain things, we look at, some of the projects that we're looking at right now. We're looking at the corn that maybe reduces the amount of nitrogen that it needs in the year, and working with that. We're working with bioreactors. We're working with saturated buffers, with wasp cobs on a farm. How do these aid into that strategy? We also do a lot of work with the cover crops and management and watershed scale cover cropping to try and figure out, define some of that. We look at different fertilizer techniques, strip till versus broadcast. And so there's a lot of different things that we're looking at, and research is ongoing on it. And so I think it's important to ask those questions, and look at websites and that, and personal experience. Talk to farmers that are doing it, and try and answer the questions, because ultimately they're the ones that are starting to master how to manage through some of these things, because there are some, especially with cover crops, there are some challenges. So we have cover crop guides, NREC, IFCA, that are available. So there's a lot of tools out there, I guess, is what I would say, to look at and work with.
Jeff, Shani, and Julie, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast today.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jeff Kerwin is a farmer and the chairman of Illinois NREC. Shani Gullavai is the research manager there, and Julie Armstrong serves as the Illinois Nutrient Research Education Council, or NREC, executive director. I'm Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason.